Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Well, today we are going to be working through one of the problems that was mentioned in a Facebook post I put up in my Facebook group a little while ago. Julie says, I can't make good splatter. Lol, I thin the paint, I try a fan brush, I tried a toothbrush, I tried a regular brush. It feels like Julie tried all the things and is not having much luck. So I'm going to do a little bit of an experiment today. Now, some of the mediums that I'm going to test out are going to be acrylic paints. Now, I have the Dina Wakley ones, which I think are my absolute favorite. I also have a distress paint here, and I think the distress paints are definitely much thinner. The Dina Wakley ones are more of a heavy-bodied sort of acrylic paint in my very limited experience. But so it will again depend on what kind of paints you have. I have some re-inkers here. These happen to be the Simon Hurley Ranger dye inks. Then I also have a couple of Distress Oxide ink pads, just in case that will make a difference. I also have a couple more products here, and that is going to be the Lunar paste. This one is by Simon Hurley, and then I also have a Distress Oxide spray ink as well. Now, it's not really a fair scientific test. None of this is scientific, and all of these products I realize are, not identical. They're not exactly the same color. I mean, they're all blues, but they're not all the same color, etc. But they are all from Ranger, so at least that's one common factor. Now I'm going to try 3 brushes to begin with. A very tiny one, a medium one, and then a bit of a thicker one. If you're interested, these brushes have the numbers 2, 4, and 6 on the side, if that means anything to you. Now, I am going to do the smallest paintbrush splattered on the left-hand side, the medium paintbrush splattered in the middle, and then the large paintbrush splattered on the right-hand side, because often I see people saying that the best way to get small splatter is to use a small paintbrush. So we are going to try that out. Now, this process obviously took me a little while. I am going to show you a couple, and then I'm going to speed through it just for the sake of life, because I will show you the end results and you get the gist of how I did it. Again, it's not all perfectly scientific. I did cover up the other 2, but when I was doing this, you can see I did leave the right hand one exposed, because otherwise I would have had to dry every single one in between, and for the majority it gets in the right place. Give or take, it ends up in the right place. So you get a pretty good idea of which painters sort of where and which paintbrush did the splattering. I also didn't have a scientific amount of water that I added. I added enough so that I thought it would splatter. And again, this is really just to give us a bit of an idea. Splattering is definitely one of those things. I think you either like it or you don't like it. And I, for one, am one of those people, when you do a gorgeous, gorgeous ink blend and then add splatter on top, sometimes that breaks my heart, because it's just the most perfect, crisp, beautiful ink blend, and then we add these splatters, but I think sometimes it looks really nice too. So there's no sort of rhyme or reason as to when I would or would not do this on a card. We are certainly going to be making a card today as well, using splatters, of course. Now, you might wonder where I got the comment from. It was on a Facebook post on my Facebook group called Come Crafting with Natasha, and there were lots of, I was asking about challenges that we were facing or that we found really tricky to master, and lots of people put up a few. So I took a few of them and thought, hey, if I can help out, or we can experiment, or people can give some tips in the comment section down below, then that would be helpful, I think. So I'm going to take some of them and do videos. I think I've done 2 like that now, and I plan to do a couple more as well. Now, here are the results. So, as I said, not completely scientific, but you can see relatively easily what I have written on them, so what they are. This is the oxide spray, and in my opinion, I think it's probably the one that you can see a little bit of difference. The finer paintbrush to the left hand side does slightly smaller speckles than over on the right hand side with the larger brush. But in general, I think there's a very minimal, maybe a tiny bit, but a very minimal amount of difference between the left hand of all of these pieces of paper. The very left, remember, is the small, the middle is the medium brush, and the right is the larger brush. So does brush size matter? a little bit, I think. I think it does a little bit. I think if you're wanting small splatters, then I would go for a smaller sized paintbrush, if not for a mind over matter factor. As I mentioned, this whole test is really just a surface level one. I think something else that I would love to test would be the different types of brushes. As Julie said, felt like she had tried a fine brush, she felt like she had tried a toothbrush, a fan brush, a splatter brush, all the types of brushes. However, I in general do not have too much trouble with my splatter. I tend to use the smallest paintbrush that I used here in the test, and I find I get pretty good results with that. So I don't have all those other brushes, and I didn't really want to buy them just for the sake of buying them for a video. But if you have them, I encourage you to just experiment. I think the best way to get good splatter for you is to experiment. However, one of the other ways or the other variables that we can really change up is the consistency of what we are splattering. So by that I mean how much water we're going to add. Now I'm going to have two different acrylic blocks here, and I'm going to put out a little bit of Lunar paste on each one. Now I just chose Lunar paste because it was quite a thick product to begin with, and so I'm just going to put a little bit on each acrylic block. One of them I'm going to put just enough water so that I think I could splatter it, and the other one I'm going to go almost in the other direction and add quite a lot of water so that we get a really thin consistency. So this one here, I actually ended up mopping up a little bit of what was on here just because it was going to spill off my acrylic block. This one here is going to be the really watery version. So in the end, it's going to almost want to fall off my acrylic block. It is very going to be watered down. And I think this, to me, is the biggest indication of what you may be successful with. So this is the really watered down one. So it's very thinned out. This is the thickest brush that I also tried before. I want to do it with all three brushes. This one here is the medium one. I escaped there by not getting the brush to drop things on my page. This is the medium brush, and I just use my finger to tap on the paintbrush to get the splatters to come down. Here is the tiniest one, and I think marginally you get the sort of same size splatter. So the small brush gives small-ish ones, the medium gives medium, and the larger gives just slightly larger. Of course, there's absolutely bigger brushes than that one as well. These were just three sort of good sized that I had ready to go. Now this one is going to be the thicker one, so I really just did enough so that I thought I could splatter it, and I'm having to press quite hard with my finger to get splatter off this, so it's pretty thick. Now this one I think gives the largest dots of splatter. Now bear in mind, that might be exactly what you're after. You may really want larger, more bold and solid drops. That may be exactly what you are after. So I'm not saying that you're after particularly fine drops, but the medium brush here gives pretty big splatter, I think, and then the fine one gives, I think, still pretty big splatter given the size of that tiny brush. But when I put these side by side, I do think that there is a noticeable difference. So I think that it is just really a case of experimenting. Change up the brush that you use. It doesn't have to be, in my opinion, a fan brush or a splatter brush. A normal paintbrush should be just fine. So I think in the end I would have two answers for Julie. One is not going to be popular, but experiment. Just try again, change up different things. And I would suggest number two being the consistency. So add water and water it down, and then keep trying. Water it down further than you might otherwise, or add less water than you otherwise might that you thought you needed. Try different things, even if you think they're not going to work. Have fun, experiment, use some copy paper so that you don't feel like you're wasting good or expensive paper. But yeah, here I think changing the amount of water that I added definitely changed the size of the drops the best. So you can see at the top there, just so this fits in my camera lens, the top is the bigger brush, the middle, across the middle there is the medium, and the lower ones were the smaller. Now we are going to get to and make a card. I'm going to use some Midnight Snack and Clear Skies. These are the Simon Hurley dye ink pads. I'm going to squish a little bit of each on my acrylic block. Now I actually ended up bulk making these cards because this was just really easy, and I think these would also be a great Christmas card if you wanted to change up the colours or not, just keep them non-traditional. I think that would be fabulous too. So we are going to do some light splatter with some dye ink, and I'm using my finest little brush as well as a decent amount of water. I have got a fairly dark, the Midnight Snack is a dark blue, as you can see, and it creates some gorgeous dark splatter, not too much. I did add a decent amount of water, and I think we got a gorgeous coverage of little tiny splatters. Now I did wait about 5 minutes for this to dry. It's relatively dry. There's a few spots that could do with more. Then I'm going to use some mint tape, and I want to mask off a bit of an uneven rectangle. I don't want this to be centered. I want it to be well off to the side and down a little bit, just because I think that creates a little bit more interest as well. Then I'm going to do some ink blending. I'm going to use Simon Hurley's dye inks for this as well, because I've found some great brushes that I am enjoying, and I'm really enjoying using them with his dye inks. So I do like Minty Fresh, probably has to be one of my favorite colors in this line. Clear Skies and then Midnight Snack. So the two colors that I used in the background splatter are going to be there as well as one that's just a little bit lighter. Now I'm definitely going to pop this on a piece of scrap paper so that I can make sure I have the right amount of ink loaded on my brush before I go in. I don't want big splotches. I want this to be really a light amount of ink added to the page here. This is actually directly onto my card base, so I don't want too much ink, and I want to be able to just have it as a bit of a background feature. These are going to blend beautifully together. I'm using the same brush for all three colors, so I'm working from darkest to lightest. That Midnight Snack can actually go really dark, so I just had a tiny amount of ink on my brush there just to make sure that I was able to blend it with the next color. As I said, I think this is super versatile, and you could use this for any occasion and definitely change up the colors and make it Christmas, or, as I said, non-traditional would be lovely for this. I'm going to use the Gina K Autumn Silhouettes. I love this stamp in the top right hand corner. I'm going to do some silhouette stamping with this one, so some black VersaFine Onyx black ink is going to stamp this, and as I said, this is all directly onto my card base, and at this point perhaps I could have used a stamping platform, but I put the trust in my inks and it paid off. We were just fine. I ended up just fine. These Gina K stamps do stamp beautifully, I have found. I've only recently really started purchasing some of her stamps and really been enjoying them because they recently got added to scrapbook.com. And I love that site because for international shipping, which can be a really big, something that I have to hugely consider when purchasing anything, international shipping can be absolutely outrageous, and they have fabulous prices and what I think is good value for money in the shipping department and in the products. And they always have freebies that you can add as well, which we always love. So that's just one of the reasons. But anyhow, that's how I ended up getting onto the Gina K items. And I invested in a couple of really good stamp sets, actually including this one, the big birthday stamp set. I know you've seen it. I've seen it a million times. I think I've used it on every single card. It's my absolute go-to. It's my current birthday stamp set that I use. Just because I do birthdays so much. That's mainly what I tend to create is birthdays. They are definitely what gets picked out the most from my little card making stash, my little card stash, and so I tend to make them the most. And I do find that if I change up any stamps, it has to be the birthday sentiment stamps because I use them so much. Now, this is the final card for today. Really quick and easy, but I hope that this video has been helpful. I hope you've learned something about splatter. If not, I hope that you will either leave us some tips down below in the comment section for any advice that you may have, or you might go and have a wee experiment yourself and see what works best for you. I will leave links down below to our Facebook group in case you would like to join us there. I will also leave links to the products used in today's video, but other than that, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, bye!